Hey TW owners, welcome to TST Garage. I'm Bart. Today in the shop with me is a TW200 Yamaha. In front of me you'll see an array of parts. Maybe a little stressful looking at it right now, but I'll break it down for you and I'll show you how to build it into a kit that will replace the whole shovel entity here on the back. It'll replace your fender, your means of holding a license plate, and also your taillight. If you choose to just leave the integrated signals on your bike without going to aftermarket signals, or perhaps even keeping the OEM signals, you can do that. This taillight does have that capability. It has running light, brake light, and signals on board. We'll show you what that looks like in just a little bit. If you are the type of person that likes external signals, you could either opt to keep the OEM signals or go with some of our nicer LED type signals that will mount with the kit and will wire in really easily. So these kits do arrive to you in this form. It's an array of parts. This video is really the installation method, the installation instructions for you guys to follow along with and build this into a proper kit that just uses 2 screws and a couple connectors to just go right onto the bike. Working on this bike is actually a breeze. If wiring things gets your palms all sweaty and anxiety kicking, don't worry, we got you covered. Our taillight kits come with a vehicle-specific harness that just clicks together and terminates in vehicle-specific connectors. On this particular bike, we have 4mm bullet connectors. This 3-wire set is for the main taillight functions, and here you'll see the signal leads. On the opposite end, we do have some female bullet connectors pre-fitted onto this harness. This is for the purpose of reusing either the OEM signals or adding aftermarket LED signals with our kit without having to tap into anything. It's basically just plug and play and go. Like I mentioned before, 2 screws accomplish the assembly of the entire kit onto the bike. I'll show you that in a couple steps beyond here. What we need to cover on the table before we jump onto the bike is how the taillight and the brackets build into a sub-assembly that will then go onto the bike. What you see in front of me here is a standard kit. This means it comes with a static bracket that does not have any means of changing the angle of the license plate hanging. If you choose to go with the adjustable kit, that kit replaces this bracket with a set of brackets that are machined out of aluminum, and they attach in a similar means to this bracket to the entire assembly. But there's a whole process behind it. We did shoot a separate video showing you how to pre-configure the adjustable setup and install it on the sub-assembly. That video will be linked in the description of this video, so please check that out if you're considering that setup. Other than that, you know, the 2 installation methods are so similar that we will just go with the simpler one that is a little bit more economical and still does your job real well. I have a feeling most people will be opting for this anyway, so we'll show you how to pre-configure this, put it on the bike, connect it with no sweat, and then we'll go over a couple of different accessories that you could opt for with this setup. Now, some of those accessories, if you haven't modified your electrical system yet, will likely be necessary for the signaling system to operate properly. Let me illustrate to you what that means. On these bikes and a couple other older model bikes that were designed in the 80s and 90s, the signaling system is designed in a way that the circuit is coupled between side A and side B, left and right. What that means is if you go to LED signals or a taillight that has signals in it that is also using LEDs, you will get quad flash, which means all the signals are going to be flashing at the same time. This is because the 2 legs of the circuit are connected together through the control lamp on your dash, and there's just no way to steer around it without either wiring or using one of our plug and play diode mod kits. Now, for you guys that already have some kind of signaling equipment on your bike that's aftermarket and you've gone away from the incandescent signals that come from the factory, you probably had to go through this already and you already have it installed, no big deal. If you don't, we do sell a plug and play kit that goes right here It's very easy to install. We do have a separate video going over how to install that, so please check that out. Again, link will be in the description. One other nuance to most signaling systems, these bikes are fitted with a standard signal relay, which means the relay is prepped to push a certain amount of current to the incandescent light bulbs in these signals. And if you demand less current than the relay is optimized for, it'll go into hyperflash. It will flash really fast or just get stuck on. So to remedy that situation, we do sell LED flasher relays. What you see here is our Gen 2 flasher relay. You bust the cap off. You could actually get into here and vary your flash rate to your liking. Again, we do have a separate video, so if you want to know the details on that, you can watch that video, link in the description. Just know that everything that we provide is plug and play, very easy to install, especially so because we have step-by-step instructions that will let you do this at home with basic tools. All right, let's quickly step into the pre-configuration here. I'm gonna put this guy away. One more thing I wanted to mention, on these taillights, we do have the option for you guys to run either clear or smoked lens. Both have ample brightness, and they're just packed with a lot of LEDs, and they're split down the middle with the signaling circuit. So they're identical, minus just the color of the lens. Choice is yours. I'll leave it up to you guys. Let's go ahead with the pre-configuration now. We have our tail light. Let's turn it sideways. We have our main carrier bracket. There is a relief cut into here that is meant to locate around the grommet of the tail light. And by locating it that way, you will line up the 3 mounting holes with the mounting holes on the tail light itself. The license plate bracket has a relief also, fits in from the bottom, and we basically sandwich this component in between these two. We'll grab ourselves a Phillips screwdriver. Actually, let's go ahead and undo this wire tie here, make things a little bit less cumbersome. There we go. All of our bracketry here is stainless steel, which has subsequently been powder coated black for a nice stealthy look. You know that you can expect good longevity out of these components. We have engineered a fastener connection here that utilizes plastic internal bosses on the taillight and self-threading screws that make the connection for us. First time you get these fasteners in, you are actually cutting the thread, and the screws we use are called plastite screws. The thread on these screws is actually trilobular. It's not circular. So what happens is when you cut this thread, the threads will lock themselves into the plastic and create enough friction so that you don't have to tighten very much on these connections. What I'm trying to get at, guys, is that sometimes we think, hey man, we're gonna ride really hard, so we need this very, very tight. This is not exactly the case here. What we wanna do is make sure that we have everything aligned. I like to press this bracket down and then this bracket up as far as it'll go. They do have slots in them. They enable you to have a little bit of adjustability, but this is the configuration that I put it on before I make any adjustments later. And typically I don't make adjustments if everything goes together well. But here, this is what I've done. When everything's in alignment and I start cinching these screws down, I'm looking for just bottom out with enough friction from the screw head to the main carrier bracket so that nothing moves around, okay? If you tug on it, it doesn't move around, it's good to go. Do not over tighten these because, like I said, they are not fragile, but they do have give. It's thermoplastic, it's ABS. They do have give. If you do stretch the thread beyond its limit, you will damage the thread. And there's no need for that. All right, we have our pre-configured unit here. This is ready to go on the bike. I think what I'll do is undo my wire ties and get my harness in place so that everything is in one unit. I could get it on there. All right, this is very simple. You locate the key and lock, snap them together, makes a little click noise. We do supply this piece of foam. I like to adhere this foam to the top of the lens. There is a chance that during rough riding out in the dirt or in terrain, you will have the top of the bodywork vibrating enough that it can make contact here. What we'll do is just adhere this piece so that it compresses against the tail a little bit and it provides a little damping for the vibration. These screws and washers here are responsible for fastening this system to the bike through these holes here. They are slots actually. We enable you to have a little bit of adjustability side to side. These are for a different bike because this bracket actually is used on a different bike as well. I highly recommend using medium strength thread locking compound on these connections here. These bikes do vibrate a lot, so you run the risk of vibratory loosening, and to prevent that, I use a little bit of medium Loctite on here, and that makes everything nice and secure. I've also provided you guys with some wire ties for cable management. We'll get into that in a little bit. What you see here is your taillight, license plate bracket, and possibly signals if you're opting to just use the internal signals. What this doesn't include is a license plate light. We sell everything in modules. We install everything in modules. On this particular bike, I am going to install the license plate light. We do have a separate video showing the installation and wiring of a license plate light on any typical bike. So we will skip the details, but if you're the type of guy that doesn't want a license plate light, I guess you're just not going to add it to your order. If you are, you add it to your order and it just goes here. In this place, license plate covers it and clamps it together. You have the option of using this double side tape should you choose to go that route, and wire routing is basically through the triangle portion here and then out to the bike, and use your wire ties for cable management. Pretty simple stuff. That's pretty much it for the pre-configuration. We're ready to go on the bike. Just want to mention, if you guys are interested in strobing brakes, brake alert, whatever you want to call it, we do have in stock this brake light modulator that we build. It is a plug and play component. It just interfaces with some of the connectors here, plugs right into the bike also, and it's compatible with the OEM and TST Industries taillight system. All right, I think I've done enough yapping here. Let's get on the bike. Let's start tearing it down. I'll show you guys how to do this job in about 15 minutes. Step one will entail removing the license plate off the bike. We are going to retain the OEM or previously used license plate hardware. If you do not have this hardware, we do supply either these reflective guys, or we do have some really cool aluminum anodized sets. You can check that out at tstindustries.com if that's your flavor. And after the license plate is off, we will need to remove the actual signals. Whether you're replacing the signals or not, these actually do have to come off. So to do that, we'll be using a 17mm open-ended wrench like this from within here under the fender. And we're also going to have to loosen some connections. The actual bullet connectors from this signal are here from the factory. It's a green and black pair, and then this one goes across the frame and back a little bit, not as far as this one, and that's brown and black. All right, over here we have our wire going from the left signal over to the other side. Like I described, it does have cable management device here. It's a wire tie. The one from the factory is the type that you can press on and remove. It is reusable, so you're going to take advantage of that. It just comes across and you end up getting to these bullet connectors. Then you have the one from the right side. It does have a little bit of slack here. I am seeing some movement here. This one on this bike was not tied down. On your bike, it may actually have a cable management device. Just be careful when you tug on them. You don't want to strain anything. I'm able to access mine here. Now I have access to these bullet connectors. As mentioned before, I'm going to be using a 17mm open-ended wrench to loosen these guys. It's kind of a tight fit, maybe a little cumbersome, but it's totally doable. On these bullet connectors, what I like to do is make sure to protect the female connector by holding the actual connecting conductor area and then withdrawing the male. If you just tug on the wires, you run the risk of ripping the wire out of the actual terminal, and that will precipitate in a problematic repair. We don't want to do that. We want to be headache free, so ensure you don't strain those wires. Let's move the other side as well. Same procedure, other side. Gain access to where the wires are. Same methodology. Remove the wires from the routing, remove the signal. That's pretty simple. Now, since we're under here, we can identify the two screws that will need to come out from the fender. Those are a 10mm head. So let's remove those now. When we remove the last one, that releases the fender fully. We want to hold it so that it doesn't drop off and strain the connections on the taillight connector. Let's suspend it as I remove the fasteners. Now we reveal this area here that has another cable management guide that is adhered to the top of the fender here. And this one has a release button. If we release it here, that opens up the clip, and we could perform the same extraction as we did with the signals. Grab the outside of the connector. This one actually came out pretty easy, probably because I had this light in and out a couple times during the R&D phase. If yours poses a challenge, I would say hold this firmly from the outside, the female portion, and then use needle nose pliers on the male side to pull that out. This will prevent you from ripping out the wires from the terminals. All right, main taillight connection, black ground, blue running light, yellow is brake light, and then on the pairs of wires for our signals, you have brown, which is the positive lead for the left signal, and then you have black, which is ground, and for our taillight connection, this will be unused. Same for the right, except the color is green for the positive. I'm not sure if you guys can actually see what I'm talking about here. A little better lighting this way. So green is the color of wire that we're interested in, and then black is the ground that is unused for our particular connection. So now that we have everything identified, let's grab the tail light. And now we'll just consider some space constraints we do have a pretty substantially long loom here. This is because we've developed a harness to be shared by several vehicles. That's not a problem. It bunches up really nicely, and we have spaces here where we could jam it up over the frame components, cinch it down. It stays out of the way. It doesn't pose any problems. We use sealed main connector, so mud and water won't be a concern. No big deal. Without consideration to wiring just yet, what we're gonna do is see how our slots here align with our mounting area, and that looks very good. And then what do we want to do about the wires? Since we're going to be using the main harness behind this bracket here, what I propose to you guys is that we take this part of the harness and bring it towards the front of the bike. That way we don't go in and out over frame components. We just have it all in one area. There is a clip up here, and I can't really show you because it would require the removal of this body component, and that's actually not necessary for our installation. So, right here, right above this component, there is a metal tab that is part of the frame. It's a very thin steel tab. If you just pry it up, it will release our harness, and then we could forward the harness to here. And then we are pretty good to go here. Let's start plugging some stuff in. For this particular bike, everything is color coded, same as factory. So here, all we're doing is just matching colors, blue to blue. Make sure that the actual connectors fit in and snap in. Simple test for that is just to give each one a tiny little tug. Black to black, yellow to yellow, you get the gist. That's good to go. Now, we have the brown connector here. Go brown to brown. I typically do not leave the signal connection to just color-coded chance. I like to check it. So what we'll do is plug it in and then make sure that the appropriate side is signaling. In some instances we've seen the configuration of green and brown be swapped. So in that case, we'll just have to undo the signal wires and reverse them, and no big deal. This is why we check ahead of time before putting everything back together. For the right signal wire pair containing the green wire, I like to bring it from the outside of the frame to the inside and run my signal wire up and over, pretty much following the same routing as these wires, and just bring it closer to where the female connector on the frame is. Get that plugged in. I have some slack in there. I'm going to carefully bring it back. Make sure that that harness side of this connection is stretched out. And that way I have pretty much similar distances on all these wires. Now, cable management will come a little bit later. What we'll do now is get the screw and washer pairs that we've prepped with the thread locking compound and get this matched to the frame mount, get it screwed in. I'm using a 4mm Allen here to get these connections set. As I mentioned before, we do have slots on this bracket, so it will afford you a little bit of adjustability side to side. So it's up to you to make sure that it's centered on your bike. And then you bring it down to full tightness. We did use thread locking compound, so I'm not really going to torque this. If I were to torque it, I would bring it to 8.5 to 9 foot-pounds. That's good to go. And the next step will be figuring out the routing here and cable management for all these wires. The approach to this step will basically be S-folding all the wiring like so, and using this frame member as our tie-off point. Now, up above the frame here, you have the plastic of the rear fender body. We could jam this all up in there, get it nice and neat. Neatness does count here. I do like neat wiring. provides a headache-free service down the line. So we would do this, figure out the best bulk distribution here, and using the 2 provided cable ties with the kit, along with possibly the cable tie that we took off the OEM setup, cinch this down. I'm not going to do that just yet. There are still several considerations that we need to talk about. All of these connections are taken up, but you do have 4 of these wires here. You have brown, green, black, and black coming off of our sub harness here. We've provided these pigtails as secondary signal connectors. So should you choose to use your OEM signals in parallel with the integrated taillight, you would install this in the same fashion as it came off. It's the reverse order of disassembly. And then you use these conductors here along with these bullet connectors, and you just plug them in until they click, and then you're good to go. I would advise that you lock down the insulator over the bullet connector. Once the connection is made, you would insulate this further to stop it from coming off the conductor and possibly touching frame, causing a short circuit. Unfortunately, these are the type of connectors that don't have a very good way of staying isolated, so I always advise that you lock them down. If you're not using secondary signals, you would also use some electrical tape. Make sure these are forwarded over the conductors and lock them down like so. Get a tight winding around there and make sure that they don't slip off, cause a short. Then you cinch it all up against the frame and you're good to go. One more scenario here. If you're using some of our TST Industries signals, or perhaps some other aftermarket signal set, here's what you would want to do. Now this will pertain to the TST Industries signals because this is what we test with. Anything beyond that, you're probably a little bit on your own as far as sequence, but based on these steps, you'll be able to figure out. Our signals do not require any aftermarket connector sets. These are the connectors that go right into the sub harness. They were developed together, so no big deal. We do need some means of making this hole a little bit smaller because the actual stud that attaches it to the bike is 8 millimeters. So for this purpose, we do have our converter sets. This is such a converter set here. You could either use the washer or the bumped out plate on the outside. Now I think the plate looks a little bit nicer. It kind of goes with the area and it's got some 3D aspect to it. So it kind of looks cool. I'm gonna do that. Put this on the outside, put our signal through. I'm not gonna do a full installation. This is just a little bit of a side demonstration for you guys that will be running this kind of a setup. Well, we will not. We're just relying on the integrated signals in here. I just wanted to illustrate this because some of you guys will opt for it. Signals come with these fasteners here. You just basically, the sequence that you take it off from the signal in is how they install back up into there. 12 millimeter open-ended wrench will get this connection tight for you. I'm not going to go through the full tightening, just want to illustrate like I said. All right, so this would look kind of like this, and then you would find your pigtails, and the yellow wire is the positive wire, black is negative, so you go black to black, you turn on your right signal for this one, and then you find which of the green or brown wires will power that. And then you proceed with cinching it up and all that. So that would get those steps accomplished for you guys. For now, I'm gonna go away from using the secondary signal. And my final consideration here before we move forward with tying all this stuff down is our license plate light. If you're not running one, forgo the next steps. If you are running one, these are the next steps for you. feed the wire through the middle triangle. The wire exit here goes here, and that will, the license plate will basically just sandwich this here. You can opt to remove the red masking here and adhere this to the underside of your license plate. I typically don't do that. They stay clamped enough, no big deal. Then you have all this excess wire. We can choose to cut it down, or we can choose to leave it long and just S-fold everything. We already have a mass of wires here, and I think I'm gonna opt to cut it to the length of these wires here, and I'm gonna make my connection here. So if you do end up cutting this wire, you'll be required to strip it back to exposed connectors. If you don't want to deal with that, just leave it long. There's no problem with that. If you are stripping the wire, we want to leave about 3.5, 4 millimeters of exposed wire. They'll work really well with our connectors. And then the connectors that come with our license plate light kit, they have 2 caps on them that screw in. The smaller one is for the connection to the actual accessory, and the larger one is for the connection to our power supply. I'm going to go with ground first. Once you take out the larger cap, it has a slit through the threaded portion. It goes on the wire that you want to tap into. It has a little piercing element in here. As you screw this down, it'll pierce the wire, but then the surface of the entire circular section here will put pressure on this and keep water out of there, so no big deal there. All right, now we unscrew the small cap here. I tend to want to not remove it from this unit because I can fumble sometimes, and if this guy goes flying, it's kind of difficult to find it. So I try to leave it on and get my wires twisted up so it's a small section, and get that inserted. Make sure that we get it through the top cap into the bottom portion here, and then we use the threads on the cap to cinch this down, give it a little tug test. That looks good to me. Now we have the red wire being the positive to the license plate light. That will go into the running light circuit. In our main harness, the running light circuit is denoted by the color blue. Again, twist it up, install our posi tap. I typically like to offset where I install on the wiring, so I don't have it all bunched up in one place. I'll illustrate that in a second. So if I have the ground closer to the plug, I will move the other wire a little bit closer to where it exits the loom. That way I don't have it all bunching up too much. Same procedure, tighten it down, pierces the shield and makes the connection. Loosen the top cap, the smaller diameter. Okay, tug test passes. I'm gonna power up the bike, make sure we have power going to the light. And in fact, we're good here. Tail light is already operating, brake is operating. We have signals plugged in. We do, but when I initiate the signals, it stays stuck on, which means the signal relay is not actually pulsating. The current drawn by the signals in the taillight is not enough. I explained this in my intro. We will be changing to our LED flasher relay in a little while here. We do have a separate video showing you guys that. I will test it once again after I change my relay. Let's go ahead and lock these guys down since I'm not using the connection here. And I did describe that these do need to be locked in place so they don't slide off and cause a short circuit. Some of you guys out there leave comments on our channel anytime we use electrical tape. If you are inclined to use heat shrink, please go ahead. That is absolutely fine. I just like the serviceability of electrical tape. It peels right off. You don't have to cut it off after it's been shrunk. So I tend to use electrical tape a little bit more on wire harnesses. That's just my preference. All right, everything looks good now. Let's get these wires tight here. What I'm gonna do is use that reusable wire tie that I took off the OEM setup just as a placeholder for now, so that I have all of my wires coming to one area here on the side and have them nice and tight and distributed the way I want to have them distributed. And if something goes not exactly according to plan, this is still removable and I could reorganize my wire bulk. All right, now it's just a balancing act of getting these wires nice and neat. Some of them will have a little bit excess, some of them will be a little bit shorter, so it's a matter of getting this down to your liking. At this point, I'm going to take off that temporary one that I put in and give everything my final consideration here. You could choose to also tie this off to here. In fact, if you don't have another zip tie, if you don't have another wire tie, you could actually use the twisty tie that came with your license plate light and make the two looms here running in parallel, lock together like this. Or if you have zip ties, you could just use another zip tie. It's nice and neat, it won't droop on you. Has some slack here, nothing's gonna get tugged. It's pretty good. Lock this down across the entire bulk of the wire here, or perhaps it does have some ability to rotate about this too because it is round. So I'm gonna lock right above this, the connector itself here. Keep my entire assembly here in place and prevent it from rotating. Let's cut off some of the excess real quick. And this reusable one doesn't get cut. I just like to put the excess under this frame component here. That will prevent it from rotating. Everything is perfectly tight here. We're good to go, nice and neat. I'm about to put the license plate on in just a moment. I will quickly do the modification I described where we replaced the flasher relay. So let's go ahead and power the bike up now and test the functions before we get too ahead of ourselves. License plate light on, running light on, brake is functioning properly. Let's test the signals. We already know signals are going to be wonky. At this point, I see that the signal is stuck on. So knowing what I know from the R&D phase of this project, the relay that is right here and the diode mod on this bike will need to be done together. This bike has not had the diode thing addressed, so we will do that now. We do have a separate video showing you guys in detail what this entails, but this is basically the gist of it. You find the location, plug it in. That's as tough as it is. I have to neaten it up, but it's not necessary for this test. Same for the relay. Could potentially change the rate of the relay if we wanted to, because it is adjustable, but those instructions are in the other video. All right, give it a shot now. Right signal, there we go. We are flashing right, we are flashing left. Everything is as it needs to be. All right, let's grab our license plate and the hardware that it was mounted with. Now, as the license plate comes onto its bracket, make sure that the license plate light is behind if you're using one. Now we just balance the look here. I like to keep it as high as possible and make sure my license plate is center and my license plate light is also center. So as I mentioned in my intro, this is the standard version that is not adjustable. If you had the adjustable version and you were mounting that at this point, you would set the angle that you like on your setup here. Here we don't have that option. If you're inclined to bend this in and out, just know you are bending some brackets that are made of steel. If you bend them too many times, they will strain and you'll have a problem where anything you hit may take off your license plate. If you do want it at a different angle, please get yourself the adjustable setup. That's pretty much it here. One final test. Boy, that looks good to me. So you can see, we took this thing from ashy to classy in about 15-20 minutes. If I weren't yapping, it'd be a little bit faster, but you get the gist. Like I said, guys, this really cleans up the tail section, but please consider the fact that you may have to do a relay and possibly the diode mod in consideration of what you need to purchase for the bike. I like what I've done here. I'm pretty much done. I think I'm gonna take this thing out right up and down the street, see how it looks out in the wild. If you guys like what you see here, take a look at TSTindustries.com. We have these parts ready to go for you, and we have some other parts for this bike and also many other bikes that you may have in your stable. Thank you for watching. See you later.